Welcome to Divinity Original Sins 2, the skill guides. Aerotheurge or Aeromancy is the last of the four classical skills. The air casters in this game have brilliant utility and mediocre other spells. You should know that in advance. Aerotheurge works well together with the Hydromancy skill or school, but it requires wet targets in order to set them up for crowd control. So target first needs to be wet, and then if it's hit by lightning, it kind of gets stunned. That's the secondary effect of the school. But like I said, it requires you to anyways go into hydromancy. And fun fact, if you anyways are in hydromancy, you might as well want to go all the way because hydromancy already has a lot of control spells. So that's the kind of dilemma where Aerotheurge is in. Now, it could look like as if that school wouldn't be useful, but the opposite is true. Quite the opposite is true. However, personally, I would only recommend you to go 2 points into Aerotheurge, maybe 3 points, because all of the great skills in this school are support school abilities. It's probably the school with the strongest support abilities, specifically for later combats. And let me start with the king of the school, which is called Teleportation. Teleportation with 4 rounds cooldown will let you reposition enemies on the target field. And now you might be like, psych, why exactly is that so good? I can tell you why that is so good. This is the ultimate crowd control. Keep in mind you have an extremely high range, specifically if you're positioned on high ground. So if you position yourself somewhere on high ground, you can put an enemy as far away as 4 full turns, which means rinse and repeat, the enemy will never get to your point. You even make it worse if the ground that the enemy needs to pass is either oiled or frozen. So with that, you probably could even get 2 enemies permanently disabled with it. Likewise, the Nether Swap, which is a wonderful ability similar to Teleport, it just swaps to enemies. I personally like to use it in order to swap in the casters from the backline and change them with the melees that go to the backline, whilst the casters are going to the front line. So enemy casters, that is, of course. Or alternatively, little pro tip, if you have a totem, if you have any corpse or any other targetable item, or even if you throw an item far enough away, then you can target an item, a totem, a corpse, or whatever, and use that as part of the nether swap. So that way you do have a second teleportation. Let me repeat, these 2 skills alone would be worth skilling 2 points into that school. They are so good. Next up, Uncanny Evasion. Extremely strong spell again. And later the Evasive Aura as the stronger version of it, which is the group aura. Uncanny Evasion basically lets you increase your dodging chance. Evasive Aura does it a little bit less, but therefore for all of the characters. And since often you will find yourself in a melee situation where you're being hit multiple times from many enemies, simple uncanny evasion can mean that you would maybe dodge 6, 7, 8 attacks, which for one action point only and a 4-round cooldown is such a strong ability. To make it clear, if all of your characters would have uncanny evasion, or even better, if all of your characters would, or some of your characters would go into evasive aura, you can make yourself immune for physical attacks, or almost immune for physical attacks for a long time by just cycling through the auras and the uncanny evasion. It is that good. So I highly recommend looking into this as well. Specifically, if multiple characters have it, then the cooldown is becoming less and less interesting. If 2 or 3 characters have uncanny evasion, you can just continuously let the tank evade, or one of the DPS evade, so that he or she is not being attacked. Next up, favorable winds. also one of the very strong abilities, utility abilities. It literally increases the movement rate of your party. And those of you that play with a melee heavy party, it is advised that one of the characters in the front line should have favorable wind, just to motivate the characters to move even further. The aura range is quite large, and favorable winds, just as any other skill that I mentioned, is simply working with your normal stats. So it is independent on whether or not you're a caster or skill deep into air magic. This one is a strong ability as well. So now to the, let's say, other abilities that are noticeable. Smoke cover has a reputation because smoke cover, by creating it with one Scundrel and one Aerotheurge ability, creates a little bit of a smoky cloud. If you bless the smoke cloud right after you created it, everything inside of the smoke cloud gets invisible. That is the safest way of stealing from merchants in bright daylight. You basically smoke cover, bless, and then begin to completely rob them. Nice to have, nice to know in order to break the game, but it is not necessarily a great combat ability. And last but not least, the standard, so to speak, abilities that you would use when you're actually skilling into air magic. Probably the most versatile one is electric discharge, typical skill for an air caster. The two skills, blinding radiance and shocking touch, in my perspective, I personally don't like them all too much, because you need to build your whole character around having being in melee. Both of these skills here, similar to electric discharge, deal damage, but they have a very, very limited range. You need to touch or almost stay next to the enemies. That, from my experience, doesn't work out super well unless you build the character tanky. But then again, a tank and intelligence is not necessarily a super synergetic combination. So little bit misdesigned in my opinion. The short range is absolutely, yeah, hammering, but maybe that's the disadvantage of having so many strong utility skills. So that would be my review for the first levels of Aerotheurge. We're continuing with necromancy, and then we go to the neutral skills.